2 rockets, 6 days, 2 giant fireballs. But here's what nobody's telling you straight. Only one of these was actually a disaster.
Yeah, that happened. It blew up during a test last night, destroyed the launch pad that's expected to play a role in the next Artemis mission.
The headline going around says Elon Musk quietly upgraded Booster 19 and that Blue Origin got embarrassed. And look, one half of that is flat out wrong and the other half is brutally, painfully true. So let's untangle it together because the real story is way wilder than the clickbait. Start with Booster 19 because the framing here is just incorrect. Booster 19 was not quietly upgraded to fly again. Booster 19 is gone. It was destroyed on May 22, 2026 during the first flight of SpaceX's brand new Starship version 3. After a clean liftoff and a textbook stage separation, the booster tried to flip around and fire its engines to fly back home, and a whole ring of those engines refused to relight. The result was an uncontrolled freefall and a violent high-speed crash into the Gulf of Mexico. So when people say upgraded Booster 19, it can't mean that one vehicle got a tune-up and lived. What it honestly refers to is 2 real things. Number 1, Booster 19 was the very first flight of SpaceX's radically redesigned V3 architecture. The upgrade was the entire rocket. Number 2, the fixes learned from that failure are being welded into the next booster, Booster 20, right now, behind closed doors to satisfy a federal investigation before anything flies again. That's the truthful version. Now, the Blue Origin embarrassed part, that one's real. And honestly, embarrassed is too kind a word. On the night of May 28th, a fully fueled New Glenn rocket, that's Blue Origin's giant heavy lifter, exploded on the launch pad at Cape Canaveral during a routine engine test. Not high over the ocean after doing its job, right there on the concrete, at point 0. One company broke its rocket in the sky learning how to fly. The other broke its rocket on the ground before it ever left. Let me show you what Booster 19 actually was, because this thing was a monster. The full V3 stack stands 408 feet tall. That's 124 meters, taller than a 40-story building. The booster alone is a 236-foot cylinder, 9 meters wide, that has to fly itself back through the thick, lower atmosphere and get caught by a tower. To do that, SpaceX ditched the old 4-grid fin layout and went to just 3 fins, but enlarged them by roughly 50% and dropped them lower on the body out of the upper stage's blowtorch exhaust. But the real heart of this beast is the engine. 33 Raptor 3 engines all firing at once, putting out more than 20.1 million pounds of thrust. Let me translate that. That's about 89 meganewtons, or roughly 9,100 metric tons of force. Officially the most powerful machine humanity has ever built, and it's not even close. To picture it, the thrust off that pad is like strapping together the power of dozens of jumbo jets and pointing them all at the dirt. And the Raptor 3 itself is a quiet revolution. The old Raptor 2 needed external heat shields, a tangle of bolted-on plumbing, and its own fire suppression system just to survive the chaos at the bottom of the rocket. The Raptor 3 prints the cooling channels directly into the engine, so it runs completely naked, no shielding at all, across 33 engines. That one change strips off thousands of kilograms of dead weight and kills the open flames that plagued earlier flights. To feed all that power, Booster 19 carried stretch tanks holding somewhere around 3,400 to 3,650 tons of supercooled methane and liquid oxygen. So, what went wrong? The ascent was nearly flawless. At 1 minute, 42 seconds, right as the rocket punched through max aerodynamic pressure, a single outer engine suddenly shut down. And here's the impressive part. The rocket didn't even flinch. The flight computer instantly rebalanced the other 32 engines, compensated for the lost thrust, and held its line like nothing happened. That's exactly the engine-out resilience you want to see. The trouble came later. Around 2 minutes, 22 seconds, the booster throttled down to just 5 engines for the violent hot staging maneuver. That's where the upper stage lights its own engines while still stacked on the booster. And Ship 39 blasted away cleanly at roughly 5,700 kilometers an hour, about 3,500 miles per hour. Then Booster 19 had to do its signature flip and fire its engines to kill its forward speed and head home. And the flip was aggressive. Too aggressive. When the command came to relight the outer ring of engines for that boost back burn, several simply failed to light. Others flickered on and died. Engineers have 2 leading theories, and both are honest guesses for now. The first is fuel slosh. The brutal flip sent the leftover propellant sloshing so hard inside those huge tanks that it may have momentarily uncovered the fuel lines, letting pressurization gas get sucked into the turbopumps instead of liquid. In a rocket engine, that's like a car engine gulping air instead of fuel. instant catastrophic failure. The second theory points at the new hot staging ring and the savage shockwaves it creates, which may have damaged those outer engines before the relight command was ever sent. Either way, the booster couldn't generate enough reverse thrust, fell into a ballistic freefall, and slammed into the Gulf. The regulatory response was instant. The FAA officially classified it as a mishap, which legally forces SpaceX into a full agency-supervised investigation, and the agency has to approve the final report before Flight 13 can lift off.
SpaceX has been ordered to investigate why its giant Starship rocket booster crashed into the Gulf of Mexico last week.
That next flight will use Booster 20. If the fix turns out to be simple software timing on the flip, the grounding could be short. If the hot staging ring or the turbopumps need a real redesign, the V3 campaign could sit on the ground for months. Independent trackers are eyeing a July or August return at the earliest. But here's the crucial nuance, and it's why this is a survivable failure. The upper stage, Ship 39, nailed its job. It deployed 22 Starlink simulator satellites through its new dispenser, survived the fiery re-entry, and gathered the heat shield data SpaceX desperately wanted before splashing down in the Indian Ocean. They flew a brand new vehicle and walked away with almost everything they needed. The booster was the expensive tuition. Now flip the coin to Blue Origin, and the mood changes completely. To understand why May 28th was so devastating, you have to know the New Glenn's track record. This is a colossal rocket. 322 feet tall, 23 feet wide, 7 methane-burning BE, 4 engines on the bottom, putting out about 3.8 million pounds of thrust, designed to haul 45 tons to orbit and reuse its booster up to 25 times. Its flight history reads like a slow climb up a cliff. Flight 1, in January 2025, reached orbit but lost the booster on the way down. Flight 2, in November 2025, was the triumph. It landed its booster on a sea platform and delivered NASA's twin Mars-bound spacecraft, making Blue Origin only the second company ever to land an orbital-class booster. Flight 3, in April 2026, actually reflew that recovered booster and landed it a second time. But then the upper stage failed, stranding a valuable satellite in a decaying orbit until it burned up. 3 flights, 2 serious failures, 0 clean operational missions. They had just cleared the FAA grounding from that third flight and were prepping for the big one, NG-4, scheduled for as early as June 4th, carrying the first batch of 48 satellites for Amazon's Starlink competitor. And then, around 9 p.m. on May 28th, during a static fire, a standard test where the rocket is bolted down, fully fueled, and the engines fire for a few seconds. The 7 BE-4 engines lit, and the base of the rocket erupted into a massive fireball. Within moments, the upper stage tilted and collapsed into the inferno as hundreds of tons of propellant detonated at once. It was reported as one of the largest rocket explosions in U.S. history. The blast lit up the Florida coast orange, shook homes miles away in Cocoa Beach, and threw up a towering mushroom cloud. Jeff Bezos confirmed everyone was safe. No injuries, no fatalities. But the hardware was a total loss. The entire vehicle was vaporized, the transporter gantry destroyed, and Launch Complex 36, a billion-dollar facility Blue Origin spent years rebuilding, was gutted. The explosion was so violent it physically toppled one of the pad's 600-foot lightning towers. And here's the part that turns a bad day into an existential crisis. Blue Origin put its entire orbital launch capability on this one single pad. The nearest comparison is SpaceX's 2016 Amos 6 explosion, which knocked one pad offline for over a year. But SpaceX had other pads, so it kept flying. Blue Origin does not. With LC-36 a smoking crater, the company's entire manifest is physically grounded until it can pour new concrete. The Amazon satellites survived only because they hadn't been loaded yet. Cold comfort when the only rocket that can carry them is now a crater. That's the difference in launch philosophies in one brutal week. SpaceX flies hardware-rich, expecting to lose rockets to learn fast, with multiple pads as backup. Blue Origin's whole identity is step-by-step, ferociously, slow and meticulous, specifically to avoid this. And they lost a rocket on a bolted-down ground test, on their only pad. The stakes go way beyond pride. Amazon's network is under a hard FCC deadline. It must have roughly half of its 3,236 satellites, about 1,618 of them, operational by July 30th, 2026. As of this spring, they'd launched around 302. The math was already nearly impossible. Amazon had even petitioned for a 2-year extension and started buying flights from SpaceX, of all companies. NG-4 was supposed to be the first of 24 New Glenn launches to fix that. Now it's gone. Meanwhile, Starlink has over 10,000 satellites in orbit and more than 10 million paying subscribers, pulling in over $11 billion a year. This explosion doesn't just delay Amazon, it cements Starlink's near monopoly. And there's a cosmic irony to twist the knife. Just 2 days before the explosion, NASA's new administrator, Jared Isaacman, stood up and announced nearly $1 billion in lunar contracts, including a $188 million award to Blue Origin to deliver moon rovers using its Blue Moon lander. The only rocket that can lift that lander? New Glenn. After the blast, Isaacman acknowledged it plainly, posting that developing new heavy-lift launch capability is extraordinarily difficult. Bezos, for his part, said they'd rebuild whatever needs rebuilding and get back to flying. So let's score this, honestly. No cheerleading. SpaceX's failure is regulatory and temporary. They flew a fundamentally new machine, gathered the data, and can isolate the engine flaw and weld the fix into Booster 20 on the assembly line. Their problem is the FAA clock, not the engineering and not the infrastructure, because they have pads to spare. Blue Origin's failure is physical, infrastructural, and existential. Money can rebuild a pad, but it can't buy back the time before that FCC deadline or NASA's lunar schedule slips. In the end, May 2026 taught one harsh lesson. SpaceX breaks its rockets in the sky to learn how to land them. Blue Origin accidentally broke its rocket on the ground and learned a devastating lesson about putting everything on a single pad. One of these companies is dealing with federal investigators about a flip maneuver. The other is standing over a vaporized launch pad, staring at a grounded future.